Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS unclaimed refunds of $1.5 billion waiting for tax year 2016. Taxpayers face July 15th deadline. IR 2020-135, July 1st, 2020, Washington. Unclaimed income tax refunds worth more than $1.5 billion await an estimated 1.4 million individual taxpayers who did not file a 2016 federal income tax return, according to the Internal Revenue Service. So if you didn't file a 2016 tax return, you may not be required to file it. You may have said, hey, I'm below the threshold, so I don't need to file the return, or possibly you were required to file it, but you simply just didn't. Either way, it's possible that you could have been given a refund on that return. And so you typically have a 3-year window to file the return and claim the refund, after which time you will then lose the ability to get the refund. Typically. Now, usually that 3-year window kind of got pushed out a little bit because the due date for the current year was pushed out. So now we have until July 15th. So we're looking at the 2016 tax return, but of course this can apply to 2016 or any tax return afterwards that you have not applied or filled out up to this point in time. So remember that the requirement to file is different than whether or not you're going to get a refund or not. Even if you're not required to file a tax return, quite possible you could have gotten a refund because main reason, one, you might be working somewhere, you might have had W-2 wages and you filled out the W-4 and therefore you got withholdings taken out because the employer was required to do so. So any withholdings you got taken out, if you didn't owe any taxes, should be refunded back to you, and so you wouldn't get that unless you filed the tax return. Also, there's 2 big credits that are what we call refundable credits, meaning there's a portion of the credit that can go beyond the tax liability, those being the child tax credit and the earned income credit. If you qualify for those, you may get money back more than the money you put in, meaning it's not just a refund, it's more like a welfare program or a support program in that way. So you might be saying, hey, I only withheld whatever, $100 or $50, it's not worth me filing the return. But if you were to qualify for a refundable credit, like the earned income credit or the child tax credit or the child tax credit, then it could be possible that your refund is substantially larger than the amount of withholdings that you had on the W-2. Now, the other question many people will have on this is basically, well, what if I don't work for the employer anymore? My W-2 is now gone. Then, you might say, I don't want to talk to them anymore, or they're closed. I can't get a hold of them. Note that the IRS, they sent the W-2 both to you and they sent it to the IRS. The IRS forces the employer to make withholdings, take money out of the paycheck as they pay employees, and to tell them and you with the Form W-2 how much was earned. That's how the IRS knows these numbers. So if you can't get the W-2 from your employer, you could contact the IRS and possibly even do it just online, get that information and file the return pretty quickly. And there's resources to file returns using software that might be even free at this point in time. So it might be worth looking into. So let's keep going forward back to the text. Quote, the IRS wants to help taxpayers who are owed refunds but haven't filed their 2016 tax returns yet, end quote, said Commissioner Chuck Rettig. Quote, time is quickly running out for these taxpayers. There's only a 3-year window to claim these refunds, and the window closes on July 15th. To claim the refund, a taxpayer for tax year 2016 must be filed by July 15th, 2020, end quote. In Notice 2020-23, there's a PDF link to that here. The IRS extended the due date for filing tax year 2016 returns and claiming refunds for that year to July 15th, 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it got pushed out a little bit. So now you got till July 15th, 2020. As the IRS is issuing economic impact payments to Americans, the agency urges taxpayers who haven't filed past due tax returns to file now to claim these valuable refunds. To collect refunds for tax year 2016, taxpayers must file their 2016 tax return with the IRS no later than this year's extended tax due date of July 15th, 2020. So we're talking about the 2016 tax returns now that would need to be filed by July 15, 2020. As you're looking into past tax returns that have not yet been filed for which you may be receiving a refund, however, you might want to be looking at 2017, 2018 as well. 2019 is due at the same deadline, the same due date, but it wouldn't be late if you turned it in by that time. Back to the text, the IRS estimates midpoint for the potential refunds for 2016 to be $861. That is, half the refunds are more than 861s and half are less. So in other words, they're trying to give you kind of like an estimated number of what your refund may be. So if you haven't filed your 2016 tax return, they're saying, hey, based on our records, you may get something like 861. It's kind of like an average, but it's not an average. They pick the middle number, which is called the median, I believe. So they're just picking a number that they think might represent the type of refunds you may get, but it's just an average or a median, some kind of estimating number. But that's something you can have some idea about. Back to the text. In cases where a federal income tax return was not filed, the law provides most taxpayers with a 3-year window of opportunity to claim a tax refund. If they do not file a tax return within 3 years, the money becomes the property of the U.S. Treasury. For 2016 tax returns, the window closes July 15, 2020 for most taxpayers. The law requires taxpayers to properly address, mail, and ensure the tax return is postmarked by July 15th date. The IRS reminds taxpayers that there is no penalty for filing late when a refund is involved. So you might say, hey, look, I'm 3 years late. I might get a refund. You're looking at your W-2 and you're saying, hey, I might get a refund of like this, $20 that I got withheld in this W-2 because I didn't need to file, and I probably have penalties and interest higher than that because it's been 3 years since I filed. Well, that's not the case, because if you think about this from the IRS perspective, usually, like if you were not to file, and if you would have filed, you would have gotten a refund. Let's say you would have got like $1,000 refund if you filed, and you didn't file for 3 years later. Then basically, from an IRS perspective, they got to hold on to $1,000 for 3 more years, which is like a loan with no interest on it, right? So for them, like if you would have claimed a refund and you didn't claim the refund, even if you're claiming it now 3 years later, they still got the benefit of 3 years of the money, interest-free, like an interest-free kind of loan. So really, so typically, if you're going to get a refund, there's typically no penalty for that component, you would think, right? That would be the general case. So even if your refund is low, you might still get the refund. And again, if your refund is low because you're looking at the W-2 and the withholding's low, then you still might qualify for the child tax credit or the earned income credit, which could go beyond simply the withholdings in terms of how much you can get back. So it might be worth like looking into at least. Back to the text. Taxpayers seeking a 2016 tax refund should know that their checks may be held if they have not filed tax returns for 2017 or 2018. So if you file your 2016 return, you're saying, yay, I got a refund, and but then you don't get it, it's probably because you may have owed taxes for 2017 or 2018, and the IRS, instead of sending out the refund, took that money and paid off themselves for the other years that you owed, 2017, 2018. You can check that, of course, calling them or contacting them through the website to see if the return was processed and or where did the refund go. Back to the text. In addition, the refund will be applied to any amounts owed to the IRS or a state tax agency and may be used to offset unpaid child support or past due federal debts such as student loans. So the IRS, you can't depend on the IRS contacting the state when you want them to be able to figure things out between the two. But they are getting better where they're saying the state, if you owe the state money, the state will contact the IRS and say, hey, IRS, don't give this person like any refund or anything. Give it to us because they owe us money. And any other kind of federal agency or government agency, possibly they might give any money that you owe to them first. And then the same could be due for child support. So if you don't get the money for any of those reasons, once again, you should be able to call the IRS and say, hey, where did my refund go? And they'll say, well, don't worry, we spent it on your behalf and paid off this debt of some kind or another. Back to the text. By failing to file a tax return, people stand to lose more than just their refund of taxes withheld or paid during 2016. Many low and moderate income workers may be eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit, EITC. For 2016, the credit was worth as much as $6,269. So again, if you're looking at your W-2 for 2016, you're saying, hey, I only got withheld like $25. It's not worth my filing. Well, you might want to look into the earned income credit, because that is a refundable credit, meaning it goes beyond the tax liability that you might have. So you may get like a money back, or kind of like a support program money back that's done through the tax return. It's a little bit complicated of a credit to calculate because it has the refundable credit, and because it's based on income or earned wages to some degree. So you have to, think about it a bit as you put it in there, but it might be well worth looking into it. It does rely somewhat heavily if you have a child as well, meaning the credit goes up typically substantially. The possible credit typically goes up substantially if there's a child involved, although it could give some credit if there's no child. So back to the text. That's a qualifying child, right? So the EITC, which is the Earned Income Tax Credit, helps individuals and families whose incomes are below certain thresholds. The thresholds for 2016 were, so here's the income threshold: $47,955, generally for everything other than married filing jointly, and then for married filing jointly, $53,505, but that's for those with 3 or more qualifying children. And then it's $44,648 for everything other than married filing joint, and $50,198 for people with 2 qualifying children. And then $39,296 for everything other than married filing joint, and then $44,846 if married filing joint for those with 1 qualifying child, and finally $14,880 for those that aren't married filing joint, and $20,430 if married filing joint for people without qualifying children. So current and prior year tax returns, such as the tax year 2016 Form 1040, 1040A, 1040EZ, and instructions are available on the IRS.gov Forms and Publications. There's a link to that here page, or by calling toll-free 800-TAX-FORM, 800-829-3676, 800-829-3676. Taxpayers who are missing W-2, 1099, 1098, or 4598 for years 2016, 2017, or 2018 should request copies from their employer, bank, or other taxpayer. So then the typical question is, well, I don't have my W-2 or my 1099 or whatnot. So really, if your basic return, you basically need the W-2, right? That's the main thing that you're going to need if you're an employee. If you are at a bank, or if you have money in a bank, if it's just a checking account, you probably didn't earn too much interest on it, so you may not have 1099 related to the interest. But if you do, you want that. If you have a savings account or a CD, then you'd want the 1099 from the bank, which shouldn't be too difficult to get. You might be able to get it basically online. If you have investments in stocks and bonds, if it's in a retirement account, then it could be the fact that they might not have you might not have any tax effect on it because it's you put it into a retirement account, although you do want the contributions that you put into that. If it's an IRA, and you need to include that. If it's a 401k, then it should be, you would think, included on the W-2 form. Now, if you don't have any of this, again, you might say, well, I don't talk to the employer anymore, or like they're closed, like something like that. Then the W-2 also got sent to the IRS. So there's going to be shortly here, they'll talk about the fact that you could go to the IRS and get the information there. Now note, the IRS may not have the actual form, the W-2 form, but they might have the information in their system from the form. The thing that they may not have is the state information, the state withholdings in there. So you'd rather have the W-2 so that you make sure you have the Fed and the state, whatever state withholdings you have, so that you can file the state form if you need to. But we're concentrating on the Fed side here, and the Fed side will have the information for the W-2. So even if you haven't filed since 2016, it might be worth getting the transcripts, even if you have this information from the IRS, just in case you're missing anything, because it's been a while and you can't remember everything like 3 years ago. So back to the text. Taxpayers who are unable to get missing forms from their employer or other payer can order a free wage and income transcript at irs.gov using the Get Transcript tool. There's a link to that here. So again, you can go to the irs.gov. You can use the Get Transcript tool. Alternatively, they can mail Form 4506-T to request a wage and income transcript. Now, notice the tax deadline's coming up for this one for 2016, so mailing it in. Also, the IRS is really kind of slow on the mail these days because of social distancing and whatnot. May take a while. You may not want to do that. If it's for 2016, might be an option for 2017 or 2018 or some, if you want to do that. But if you're pushing for 2016 to get that in, to get that refund, you might want to go with the online tool. Could be a little bit faster here. Back to the text. A wage and income transcript shows data from information returns received by the IRS, such as Forms W-2, 1099, 1098, Form 5498, and IRA contribution information. It's got like everything you need for normal taxpayers there. So anyways, taxpayers can use the information from the transcript to file their tax returns. Okay, and then they got a table down here that you could take a look at, which is a step-by-step estimates of individuals who may be due 2016 income tax returns. So they're kind of estimating 2016 tax returns by state. I won't go over the whole thing, but they got the states laid out here, and then the estimated number of individuals that they're thinking haven't filed for 2016 that could file, that maybe due a refund, and then the median potential refund, which is like the middle number, kind of like the average, but not the average. It's like another kind of number that represents the total population that could be refunded to an individual. And then they have the potential refunds in total dollar amount. So if you want to check that out by state, then you can do so. It's kind of interesting. All right.